What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions of Sandland, an open-world action-adventure based on the manga of the same name by Akira Toriyama, though it's my understanding that this particular game expands upon and takes that a little bit farther, exploring some new ideas and story content. As for myself, I checked out the demo of this game a little while back, though that was a bit limited in nature, so some of what I'm talking about here is brand new to me, but the general gist is that we play as Fiend Prince Beelzebub with a few of his friends searching for the legendary spring, which can provide water to the desolate sands, as it were, because in this particular world, it's a sort of post-apocalypse where about 50 years ago, humanity fought wars until the planet was nothing but a desolate desert, and now there is a very extreme struggle for water, which is all controlled by the human royals and the king, who use their monopoly on water to control everyone out in the wasteland, hence your hunt for the spring. But that's not the only thing we'll be up to. We'll be driving all sorts of vehicles and building up a town called Spino and taking out enemies as we go. So first impressions wise, a few things right out of the gate. Technically speaking, I haven't had any problems with this one, no crashes, no bugs. It has rebindable keyboard controls, so everything is looking good on that front. But it's obviously still early and I might run into stuff later on. Otherwise though, the story seems interesting enough. The visuals are very, very striking. The vehicles are fun to mess around with, though the combat itself I have a feeling is probably going to be the weak point of this game, and I'm curious if they can fill this desert with enough activities to make it interesting, because I've only played for a couple hours at the time of this particular video, and it feels like I'm not an insignificant way into the story already. But first, let's talk about the combat and vehicles. So, on foot, this is pretty much your standard light and heavy attacks. You can do a charge up with your heavy attacks, or as you start to level up and apply skills to you or your followers who will also be fighting alongside you, you can unlock different moves and combos and the like to also use. Pretty basic action stuff, bit of a button masher in that regard, but then there's when you're in your vehicles. There's apparently going to be up to 13 different vehicles for us to use, but the tank is sort of the default one, and you can use these vehicles in combat situations as well. You'll be able to have up to 5 of them with you at a certain point that you can swap between without having to head back to the main hub area. And so far the vehicles are just fun to use. You can do things like fire machine guns and tank rounds with these, or later on you get a robot that jumps for you. There's a more melee oriented one. I know you get a motorcycle at some point and a few others even. So I'm curious to see how diverse the vehicle combat in particular gets, though it's probably worth a mention as well that outside of vehicles you can actually also engage in stealth combat. There are times where you'll be sneaking through enemy bases and the like, taking out enemies stealthily where possible. So there looks to be a fair bit of variation in that regard outside of just when you're engaging enemies on foot, which feels a little basic by comparison. So I'm curious if that will pick up in the later parts of the game. But once we've gotten through the intro though, we'll get access to a town known as Spino, which we will be tasked with fixing up and protecting because it happens to house the main garage that has the things you need to properly upgrade our vehicles. Which is probably a good time to mention that the vehicles themselves will be customizable with all sorts of parts and cosmetics that you can use just to add a little extra layer to it. Now, I don't know what all the town will be capable of doing, mind you, but I know that we'll be upgrading this town and bringing it back to life, making it our main hub of operations, which is where most of the side content comes in because doing those quests is what fixes up this main hub area, which forms one of our primary forms of content, with the other being exploration, as we will be able to find radio towers out in the desert here that can then open up the map and show points of interest where you might say take out bandit camps or fight off the royal army, for instance. So in that way, I'd say the game almost does feel like a more traditional open world, which might make the game have trouble justifying its full AAA price tag, but I'd prefer to see the whole game before I make that particular judgment. Now, just to add a little intrigue here, as you've probably seen on screen, Beelzebub is hardly human. In fact, demons seem to be a known quantity in this universe, though they don't typically interact with humans very much. And while they're more than happy to torment them, that's usually the end of it. but our prince in particular is engaging in what appears to be a sort of coming-of-age journey along this particular route, which might make for some interesting story beats if nothing else. So all in all, first impressions of Sandland, I would say this is a game that's trying to do a lot of things, and at least in the early game, I think it is mostly succeeding at them, as it's been a pretty enjoyable experience so far, and I'm excited to get to the bulk of this particular title and really dive into all these various systems and see how far the game actually manages to take them. Though, I must admit, with that exact thing in mind, this is a game I'm actually going to see about getting my son into. He's younger, 5 in particular, and I think he might really jive with this one. So even if this game winds up not being for me once I fully review it, I do have a feeling my son is going to love it. But as first impressions go, so far so good. I'm enjoying it. I'm mostly just curious if what they've established here can hold up over the course of the game, as these types of games tend to be a little checklisty when it comes to their open world, and with this being a desert that you mostly drive around, I think it might also be prone to simply feeling a bit empty, and the on-foot combat has me a little worried as well. But all of which are questions I'll have to answer as I play the game more. It's going to take me a little bit to get through this one because I'm working on a couple of other projects first, which means realistically it'll probably be the end of next week at the earliest before you see this from me, if not a little bit later. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed the video or you're simply looking forward to the full review, do feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know how you feel about this one down in the comments section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.